Aloha. I just had a thought like a couple minutes ago. I was thinking to myself as I was watching this video. I was thinking, you know what? One day, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's gonna be dead. Like Carl Sagan. Like Carl Sagan, he's dead. Neil deGrasse Tyson will die sometime soon. Same goes for Bill Nye. Who's gonna be the people that are gonna be going on these shows after that? Who's gonna be the people that go on and indoctrinate people into the scientism mind frame? And I don't see anybody else, so there's gonna be a new mindset. I was just thinking, he looks kind of old, like he's looking older than usual in this video. And I just wanted to share this video as an example of the hypnosis of scientism, being that Neil deGrasse Tyson is one of the main, if not the main, hypnotists for the scientism community. And this little 15-minute clip is a really good example of how they utilize ego and bully mechanisms and just straight up a lack of depth to, like he uses the word, inoculate you into this religion. And that's what it really boils down to. And he's going to use all of these back and forths to make you believe that his word should be the only word that you listen to. Does that sound familiar? Sound like anything else? She reads off a quote in here that says, you know, science is science and that's it. And kind of what triggered this video to me was one of the main things that's going on right now in this whole back and forth between flat versus globe is that the scientism community really has no legs to stand on, because the very nature of worshiping a 10% version at best of true science is inherently out of balance, which is actually the case, or the main focus of what I'm observing and other people are observing in this reality, the synthetic reality that is excuse me, science. We're not saying that all of science is wrong. When you boil it down in reference to the relationship between science and flat earth, once you start getting into flat earth, you start opening up the door to alchemy, which is the relationship between true science and a true understanding of the non-physical reality, or the spirit, or the soul. This gets lumped into the category of mainstream religion and gets demonized as a villain against the superhero that is the scientism community. That's how they sell this conditioning program and indoctrination to the masses. And they use mouthpieces like Bill Nye, Michio Kaku, and Neil deGrasse Tyson to maintain that ego of science is the all-knowing end-all be-all of your existence, because they worship the materialistic plane of existence. They don't care about anything that literally say there is no soul, there is no non-physical reality. It's all about, this is why the alien agenda is so big, because aliens presuppose UFOs, which UFOs are so-called advanced technology, which is just an extension of the science that we have today, the technology that we have today. So it's basically like a carrot dangling out front of a donkey to keep that donkey going on. Well, technology like that, married with the hope for an alien technology to come along in the future, is that same carrot. So in order to keep people in that bubble of lack of understanding, understanding, and overstanding of their entire reality. Your reality has to be overcomplicated and locked into this light year, alien agenda, infinite space, no meaning and no purpose, no connection to any non-physical reality. You have no soul. There is no spirit. There is no creative sort of engagement or intelligence in our reality. Everything just happened by mistake. Everything that is alive today happened because gravity just sucked everything, all these elements together, and created a ball of something that evolved from dinosaurs to monkeys to you and the iPhone 7. That's basically what the entire scientism community is standing on. And this is a good example of how that community uses people like Neil deGrasse Tyson to sit up there with his smug attitude and his arrogant vest and his tie and just kind of punk everybody into just accepting their indoctrination or their conditioning. So check this out. Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of his latest interviews in Australia.
And Neil deGrasse Tyson joins us now from New York ahead of his next speaking tour of Australia in July. His latest book is called Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. Welcome to Late Line.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Astrophysics for People in a Hurry sounds like you were trying to be polite when you just could have called it Astrophysics for Dummies.
That title was already taken, but apart from that fact,
there's a setup. That's a setup of he's very smart and we're very dumb. So good thing we have him on this show so he can tell the dumb people what life is really about, what the universe is really about. Same way they get these people who they'll call in and make these video questions like on Big Think. They'll have some on here too, but you'll see that in a second. It's all a show. It's all Hollywood.
Actually, for people who are deeply curious but who live a full day.
Like the red carpet is another way that makes you really believe in the Hollywood celebrityism. The red carpet, these trophies that they get from the Academy and so on and so forth. It's all a big show to make you believe what they want you to believe in. And he's going to explain to you how his book is pretty much just like another Bible.
They have a job, they go to school maybe, they have kids, and they're just little snippets of time in their day where they would not otherwise be served. They would not otherwise fulfill the curiosity that they know they have retained, perhaps since childhood, or perhaps it's been fanned by other, maybe they saw a documentary or...
So it's basically astrophysics for the slave mind. That's what he's saying. It's for people who are locked into the Western so-called civilization slave program. They don't have time to think. They don't have time to research. So I made a book to tell people, hey, this is what your universe is really about. And just read this and you'll be as smart as I am.
Or they read some other book. And this is my attempt to curate a selection of mind-blowing cosmic knowledge into a small volume so that I can serve the people who are too busy
They're
to read fat books. And that was the motivation. But no, anyone who's read it, they're not saying it's for dummies. It's, you got to get in it. It's real.
I agree. And I got the distinct impression while I was reading it that while you say you've written it to help improve people's scientific literacy, it's not really an altruistic endeavour. You want to almost feel a responsibility to make people smarter about science.
Like a saint.
Well, it's an interesting way to think about it. I think it's not a responsibility, sure, but I think of it as a duty. If I have the capacity to do so, and it could serve the greater good, then I would be irresponsible if I did not. And that's how I think about it, and that's what motivates me.
I wanted to ask you why you chose the particular quote you did to start the book. It reads, "The universe is under no obligation to make sense to you." The quote is, of course, by a famous scientist, you.
Well, there are other quotes from other scientists in the book. But my point there is, so often you get people who maybe haven't studied science deeply or don't know what science is or how and why it works. They will invoke their own sort of sensory judgment as to whether they assess something to be true.
Oh, your senses?
But science, when it reached maturity, I would say beginning 1600 and onward, with the near simultaneous invention of the microscope and the telescope, enabling investigations into two completely different...
The science that he's talking about started at the invention of the telescope and all that other stuff. This is what they are priding themselves in. That is the very definition of the beginning, the origins of so-called Western civilization. And he's just one of the mouthpieces out there to make you believe in that.
Directions in the universe. We are taking in knowledge and insight and information that had no relationship to our five senses as we evolved in the plains of Africa. Those senses that we've developed were really good for knowing if the lion wants to chase you and then eat you. They're good for that, but they're not good for the quantum physics.
So that's what he's saying. He's saying the indigenous and the aboriginal people are primitive. They have basic understandings of their reality, like not to get eaten by a lion. But the telescopic human is more evolved, and we have an observation of our universe that comes from a quantum foundation. And I am the speaker for this, and I write little books for dummies so they can understand what the new human, the evolved human, is thinking and how they perceive their universe.
Expanding universe, or a big bang. And so that's why I lead off by saying the universe is under no obligation to make sense to us. It's the observations that matter, even if they conflict what feels right to you. We have learned to trust the observations because that is the measure.
See, don't trust your senses, don't trust your observations, trust your indoctrination that comes from the so-called powers that be, that tell you how to think, that punk you into just accepting whatever comes out of their mind control programs. And in fact, if you think differently, you're no different. In fact, you are worse. You are less evolved than the primitive and the savage indigenous and the aboriginal people that we evolved from. You're taking 2 steps backwards. How dare you? You are a disgrace to humanity.
Reality.
In response to President Trump's decision to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord, you wrote to your 7.6 million followers on Twitter, "If I and my advisors had never learned what science is..."
You see how they gotta build these 7.6 million subscribers on Twitter. They had to build this guy up. Like, how? Like, would anybody say that to somebody like, I don't know, like Tom Cruise or somebody like that? And would they act like that? Like, they wouldn't have, nobody would have to do that. They have to build these assholes like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye up. This is like when they make the applause sign go extra long for Bill Nye on the Bill Maher show, and they tell him he's a rock star with a bow tie, and he sits there all doughy-eyed like, oh, you know, I'm just a regular scientist. They just have to build these guys' egos up. Same thing happened to Brian Greene, who goes on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert, and he builds up Neil deGrasse Tyson too. They have all these experiments and make people clap extra hard. Go and look at those videos, and if somebody's interested in something like that, look at the volume increase and the how Stephen Colbert builds up these scientists or these physicists or whatever when they go on this show. It's the same way when they talk about this Twitter following, as if it matters. Especially when the people are buying Twitter followers, people are buying subscriptions and views and likes and all that other nonsense. These guys got their fingers on the controls. Think they don't have the fingers on Twitter followers?
How and why it works, then I'd consider pulling out of the accord too. Without American leadership in climate action, what are your gravest fears for the
climate
future
control?
of the planet?
This is how they make
So
climate change, global warming. This is how they make superheroes. They make you love them because they are the ones out there speaking for change against the people who are just wasteful, the humans who just burn up all this gas and steal all this oil and burn it up and destroy our atmosphere. Oh, who's out there fighting for us? Dun, 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 dun. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Oh, thank you, Neil. Thank you, Bill Nye and Brian Greene, for speaking for climate change. You guys are the real superheroes for planet Earth. You guys collectively are Captain Planet. Thank God. Thank the God of scientism for you guys.
So the problem is, by the way, it's too easy to just beat up on elected leaders. I take a very different view of this. People like saying Tyson attacks Trump. I've never mentioned Trump in any tweet, ever. And so, for me, if he's duly elected and his supporters like what he's doing, then the issue is not about him, it's about his supporters, my fellow countrymen. And so, as an educator, I feel like maybe they don't really deeply understand how this works, how science works, what a scientific truth is, when multiple experiments agree. And not every single experiment, because you'll always have a range, an experimental range in the results people get. But when there's an overwhelming a consensus of observations and measurements, not a consensus of opinion, it's not about opinion, it's about measurements and observations. When they align, you don't have the luxury to cherry pick the extremes of these measurements and then declare that that's what is true. You could do it in a free country, but if you start rising to power and then base legislation on it, then you are building a house of cards of decisions that have no correspondence to a reality. So it's incumbent upon me to at least tell the public that if it's a free country, yes, but your decisions or your absence of decisions have consequences. And I just share the consequences with people because maybe they didn't otherwise know this. And it should be the duty of all scientists to spend some part of their lives engaged in this kind of activity.
Climate science and the opinions of it is an incredibly vexing issue in this country as well as in yours. We have parliamentarians who are very vocal in denying and calling scientists who deal in this issue alarmists. How do you personally counteract the people who would say you and others in the scientific community are alarmists? What is the single blow your mind fact that you throw back at them to help dispel any kind of doubts?
Yeah, I just say, if you gained a few pounds last week, do you want to repeal the law of gravity because you disagree with the consequences of it? When Einstein wrote down E equals mc squared and it became the foundation of the nuclear arsenals in the Cold War, were you saying, I choose not to?
You see how they use their same people. They use over and over and over again. It's like they bring Einstein up. They bring the Big Bang, the theory of relativity, the theory of gravity. They bring the bad guys against climate change, the bad guys in politics, the bad guys of religion. All of this is not based on like facts and observations like he's talking about. It's just based in making other people more wrong, so you're less wrong, which makes you ultimately the most right. And that's what they televise for you. The most right people in a half-assed at best perspective of your reality.
Believe that when the National Academy of Sciences, one of our most revered institutions,
more hands, Neil deGrasse, put more hands up.
Rank, but because
use your hands
they
more,
get together
like
and
a magic
establish
spell.
Objective truths about what science tells us about our lives, our environment, about the world. This is an agency that told us that smoking causes lung cancer. This is an agency, and yes, there was conflict at the time. The smoking companies, R.J. Reynolds, and they were objecting to it, of course, because it would affect their bottom line. But
he really cares. Neil deGrasse really cares
even
about
in the middle
people,
of whatever subterfuge is going on.
You can just
this
feel
agency, over the years, by the way, this agency, the National Academy of Sciences, was signed into law by Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln in 1863, in a year where he had a whole lot of other concerns. In the middle of the Civil War, the Gettysburg battle, his Gettysburg Address, he says, I think we could benefit from advice from a body of scientists who can think about how to advise.
Einstein, telescopes, Abraham Lincoln, America, hot dogs, apple pie, the globe, climate change, technology, your smartphone. This is what we have done for you. And look at how I use my hands. This is way more believable than anybody else who is using their basic observations of their senses and just calling themselves, questioning their reality with a sprinkling of discernment. Those are just dummies. Listen to the smartest people. I am Captain Planet.
How to guide us in ways that science can influence.
It's like policy. He's holding a baby.
And so
like,
that relationship between the U.S. government and science has crossed the aisle many times. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican president.
George Washington.
Most important legislation that created the Environmental Protection Agency.
What?
Right, in 1970 was signed into law
by
a Republican president. All right, so this is not historically
this is
has
a
not
hypnosis.
been just partisan.
Just imagine, like, his hands are basically, and what he's saying is basically like putting a clock, like hypnosis people, hypnotists, they just swing that little pocket watch in front of your eyes. That's what he's doing with his hands, and how he's talking and like punking you into believing what he's saying with his authority of being on television.
It's been, people have understood what role science plays in our lives. It's only recently, and so that concerns me because it's destabilizing.
Put them down, Neil.
For the future, not only of the country,
there you go.
but
get them
of
up
course
there.
For the world.
The
United States
make
had such a leadership role
with your hands.
all these years.
Make more spheres.
We saw questions from our viewers, and I'll throw the first one at you from Jonathan Russell, who writes to us via Facebook. How do we band together to save ourselves in a world of misinformation, disagreement, and plain disregard without undermining democracy?
Thank you, Jonathan Russell.
Yeah, I think the internet landed in our lap, and we all celebrated the access to information, but I don't think we foresaw one of the consequences of it, which is with brilliant search engines, you can have whatever idea, however fringy it is, type it into the search engine, and you will find every other person in the world who has exactly that same idea, giving you false affirmation of it being true.
Automatically.
And now you say,
It's automatically false because it challenges his religion. That's why it's false. And he's going to get into how that's wrong. How access to more information, access to more communication with more people, cross-referencing yourself with more people is actually a failure of the education system. How in the hell is access, just plain old more access and communication, more access to information, and be worded as a failure of education? No. He used the wrong word. It's not a failure of education. More access to information and more access to communication that challenges your systems of beliefs is a failure of indoctrination.
true and everyone else is not. And what it has done is it has fractured the world. I don't know that we all saw that coming. So what we need is a tandem way in the educational system
to indoctrinate people,
to inoculate us
excuse me, inoculate.
being distracted by false information that's out there. This should be a fundamental part of what it is to be educated.
Like vaccines?
Being able to judge what is true and what is not. And by the way, science literacy may be the best kind of inoculation against that, because it trains you. It's not so much what you know. Yes, you should know how an internal combustion engine works, or what evolution is, or the Big Bang.
Or like
sure,
simple humans.
But deeper than that is science literacy is a capacity to know how to think about information and how to turn data into information, information into knowledge, and then knowledge perhaps into wisdom. That is an arc.
You see how that was worded? Let me play that again. Because he says perhaps wisdom. It doesn't go, there is no wisdom coming out of the university system. That's the bridge between the alchemy that I was mentioning in the beginning of this video. Wisdom comes from the understandings of the level of consciousness outside of the system in which the non-physical reality. Wisdom that goes on forever. Science does not go on forever. Science is basically the study of limitations. The non-physical is where you start to question the infinite existence, or the true alchemy, the balance between true science and the spirit. Let me play this again so you can see. Listen to that wording, and here it makes sense. But once he gets to wisdom, he has to use the word perhaps, because he knows, and people know consciously and subconsciously, that science ain't about wisdom. There's no wisdom in science. It's just science. Wisdom exists outside of that, where you actually think for yourself and pass those values down to future generations. Science ain't about that. Science is about indoctrination. Science is about conditioning.
It trains you.
Scientism.
It's not so much what you know. Yes, you should know how an internal combustion engine works, or what evolution is, or the Big Bang. Sure, but
see how they slid all that in.
Is science literacy is a capacity to know how to think about information, and how to turn data into information, information into knowledge, and then knowledge perhaps into wisdom. That is an arc of science.
Data to information to knowledge, then perhaps wisdom. When in fact the scientism community is only about data, false data when you really go into it, false information when you go further into it, and false knowledge when you go even further into it. But when you get to wisdom, that's where he cannot say firmly that it's about wisdom. He can say firmly it's about data, information, and knowledge. That's getting towards the edge of it, because then you're starting to go into the behavioral sciences, which is and everything else. It's not really about numbers. But once he mentions wisdom, which is like the peak, that's the elder frequency, that's when he has to say perhaps, because you will automatically, definitely, subconsciously call bullshit on that, and consciously be kind of unsure about him using that, because obviously science is not about wisdom. It's about sitting up in front of you with a galaxy tie and a fancy vest and making sure that you think like they tell you to think.
It's literacy. Without that, it is a free-for-all of information that's out there. And so no one wants to get rid of the internet. No one wants to constrain the internet. We like to keep our freedoms, but we want to be informed as we...
They don't want to constrain the internet. They want to constrain how you think and utilize the internet. They want to constrain how the expansion of consciousness. This is how these magicians get around not telling you about your enslavement. He say, no, of course not. We're not trying to limit the internet. Don't be crazy. We're talking about limiting your consciousness, limiting how you think. That's what we're really talking about. We would never want to put restrictions on Facebook and social media and the internet itself, but they will gladly indoctrinate your children to not think for themselves.
We are bathed in our freedoms. Otherwise, we will not be good shepherds.
This is why...
Okay, so...
Shit, this is shepherds. There you go. This is why they have to promote the idea of freedom so much. Independence Day, the Columbus Day, all of these military jets flying over the Super Bowl and the World Series. It's all to make you think that you're free. You've never been free. There's been so many generations that have been enslaved. There is no freedom. And then you have people who just want to fight back and forth. What about people in other countries that are less free than... Get the hell out of here with all that nonsense. Obviously, people have the idea of less freedoms, but the idea that I'm referencing or observing is that the entire system is a slave system. It's not about your freedom, which is why they have to tell you and talk about and amplify freedom all the time. Painting red, white, and blue birthday cakes and hamburgers and hot dogs with ketchup and mustard, red, white, and all this garbage nonsense out there.
David Powell has sent us a video question along these same lines. Let's take a look.
The majority of the people out on this planet believe that the Earth is still a globe. I've recently encountered someone who believes it's flat. It's created by NASA as a conspiracy and a cover-up. And all the images we see of the universe are created by CGI. My question is, why do these people exist? And can you please show them some light? Thank you.
So, can you
Bring
shed
the
some
light.
Yeah, again, there's some missing education. It's a failure of the educational system.
What?
And yeah, you can go chase after these adults who speak this way, and I don't know that I have the time. I don't know that you have the time.
I don't have the time. Neither do you have the time to entertain such nonsense. Get out of my house with that garbage. We are talking about true science, not this flat nonsense. Be gone, critical thinkers. Look at that. How can the access to more information, how can the communication or people critically thinking be a failure of education? It's a failure of the indoctrination system they call the education system, but it's not a failure of organic education. It's a failure of your conditioning. It's a failure of your mind control, because you no longer subject yourself to the limitations that are amplified by their slave control grids and systems.
To do this. But what we do know is, though, if, again, in a free country, let them think Earth is flat.
Laughable.
I'm not going to chase down people. But
in a truly free country, he wouldn't even be saying the words, let them, anything. It's not a matter of letting anybody think or challenge anything. It's not about that. That's what they have to sell you that all the time. This is another proof of you not having any freedoms. You're labeled crazy. You're labeled this not having time to even entertain such nonsense by this arrogant piece of shit who constantly goes on these television shows and YouTube channels to mind control your children. Why I'm so passionate about this is because I don't give a shit about 30 and 40 and 50-year-old people who are out there trying to defend the globe and all that other stuff. These are these 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 little kids who are just like worshiping this asshole because he's on the Tonight Show, because he goes on the Bill Maher Show, because he's shaking hands with Barack Obama, because he's on YouTube channels talking about flat Earth and fancy CGI images of nebulas and the Crab Nebula and black holes and stardust and all that other nonsense. That is your real enemy out there. If anybody, he's at the cusp. He's at the bottom of the barrel of these just, you know what I'm saying. I don't even gotta word it. He's just
danger would come about. Well, the problems would arise if that person runs for office, rises to power, and then decides to become head of a space agency. That doesn't work, right? No.
More hands.
So what happens?
See,
there
that's
is
what
you get.
See, that's what they use. They make you think that. Oh my goodness! You see how that's worded? It's automatically amplified to let them be idiots, let them be dumb, and think about the universe in their own house. But if they try to be some kind of politician or the head of some space agency, what such poppycock? How dare they? No. This dude, this is straight up hypnosis.
Someone who is underinformed or just simply ignorant, granted power over people who are not. And that does not work in a democracy at all. That's an inversion of
ignorance doesn't work in a democracy. Well, there's an obvious counter to that argument. Why the hell is Donald Trump the president of the United States?
Of a knowledge pyramid that will ride a ship off the edge of your flat Earth as you pass legislation that doesn't otherwise understand that. There were people 100 years ago who, by the way, there's a passage in the Bible where it's 1 Kings 7.
Good job,
2
Neil.
Kings 7.
Good job.
Where it describes the shape of King Solomon's pond outside of his castle, outside of his mansion.
Hands.
His residence.
Hands.
And it says it is round on all sides.
Okay.
30 cubits across. 30 cubits around, 10 cubits
Get it
across.
right, Neil.
Well, if you divide those two numbers, you get 3.0. That is the Bible's attempt to give you the value of pi. Okay?
Okay.
The ratio of the circumference of a circle to the diameter. Well, that's the wrong answer. Okay? Pi has actually some...
So that's like he did before. Instead of using primitive and savage people that get eaten by lions, how we are more evolved than them, he's saying now, in this example, people who were following and still follow the biblical perspectives of their reality are also less evolved, nonsensical pieces of garbage coming up with the circumference of pi on being only 3. What, 3.0? Those guys are just silly. Of course it's not 3.0. It's 3.2 blah 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 forever. And who came up with that? Me. I did. Neil fucking Degrasse Tyson. I'm the guy who came up with that. So, yeah, me and my crew. So anybody else is just a bunch of dumbasses. So we're the smartest monkeys on the planet. Everybody else can just shut the hell up.
Decimal values there. There were places that
we come up with decimal values, bitch.
Pi, because of that value that had appeared in the Bible, legislated to be 3.0. These are people who don't understand mathematics in charge of legislation. And so something's missing in the educational system when people do not know when they don't know something.
Whoa.
That's another part of how you should be trained. Do you know when you don't know something? And I don't require leaders to know everything, but if you know that you don't know something, then you bring in advisors who do. That is the sign of great leadership.
Really? What if those advisors don't know whether or not they don't know? How about that one, Neil? Doesn't that logic go on forever? But since it sounds so intelligent and you have a book talking about astrophysics, nobody's gonna say anything to you, especially the way you use your hands in the interview. It's just wonderful.
Okay, another video question. This one from Richard Lobb.
Hello Neil, my name's Richard Lobb. My question for you today is, if matter and antimatter were produced at equal rates at the beginning of the universe, could these antiparticles still exist today? And if so, what sort of effect could they be having on our current universe? Thank you.
Just happen to have a 3D printer, the pinnacle of human technology. Happen to have a 3D printer running in the background so you can actually hear it too. And this is the hypnosis. They choose these people. They choose these videos.
Matter and antimatter.
Yeah, great question.
Great question.
Just a quick thing about the flat Earth.
One more slap.
During a lunar eclipse, where the sun casts Earth's shadow
Give it to
on
us.
the surface of the moon, you would have some lunar eclipses where the shadow would just be a flat line, and that has never happened.
Oh, snap, Neil!
It just has never happened.
Whoa!
It has always been
Burn!
A curved surface, and the only
Burn
thing that
flat
makes a
Earth.
curved shadow, no matter the angle of the illumination, is a sphere. Just so you know. About antimatter, yeah. I mean, the early universe, all our understanding of the early universe, and I detail this in the book, by the way. There's a whole section on just this episode where all matter would have had an antimatter counterpart. But what happens is we know that they annihilated. Matter and antimatter, when they get together, they annihilate.
The Big Bang, evolution, gravity, relativity, dumb religious people, dumb primitive and savage indigenous and aboriginal people, dumb everything that predates telescopes and heliocentrism. Everything is just dumb and silly and should never be entertained. And the only thing that matters is today, what we have given you, your technology. How are you able to even watch this television? You're ungrateful.
And they make energy. In this case, it makes photons of light, okay? So what's interesting is, how come there's still matter left over? Well, there's not much matter compared to how much matter plus antimatter there used to be. There's just a little bit left. And there was what we call a breaking in the symmetry of the universe, which is not well understood, but we know it happened. And that symmetry breaking made slightly more matter than antimatter particles. And that slight extra is what was left over after everyone paired up at the dance party, all right? You pair off everybody, and it looks like it's about 50-50. Everyone pairs off, and what you'll see is those who remain, who were slightly more matter than antimatter, and that constitutes all the matter that we know in the universe. So no, the antimatter manifests in the form of light.
This interview is
Photons coursing
antimatter.
through the universe. That is the leftovers of
Burn.
what was once matter annihilating with antimatter.
I have one more that I can ask you very briefly, and it's from Xavier Andrews, who sent us a video question.
Oh, God. We have technical difficulties.
Oh, I'm not sure if we've got it.
Broken, Neil. Fix it.
Here we go.
Just
Borat?
wondering, do you think that we are alone in the Milky Way galaxy, or could there be other life?
Alien programming.
We have only
Coming
brief
up.
time.
Yeah.
Are we alone?
Brief, it's
I got
quick.
I got you. So often when people ask that, they wonder if there's other intelligent life or other sort of macroscopically interesting life. But to a biologist, if you find a microbe somewhere else, we're not alone. There's other life somewhere else in the universe, certainly in the galaxy. So right now we have 3,000 exoplanets orbiting other stars that could be repositories of life as we know it, or even better, life as we don't know it. All studies of the universe, the molecules and the in life and the prevalence across the galaxy, the frequency of planets tells us that it would be inexcusably egocentric to think that we are alone in the universe.
Neil deGrasse Tyson, I really am disappointed we're out of time. I thank you so much for giving us your time this evening.
Thank you. You only left half hour for the whole universe. Next time have more.
Don't put this in. Oh no, Neil. Good. All right. It's enough of this nonsense. Like I said in the beginning of this video, this dude is gonna die sometime soon, and you guys are gonna have to critically think for yourself. So what's gonna happen then? He's gonna be dead, just like all the other assholes out there that are trying to mind control your children. So that's basically what this video is meant to portray, so we can actually start thinking outside of this hypnosis now, before things get deeper and people fall more deeply into this mind control program. So thank you for joining me if you made it all the way through to the end of this video. Until next time, from all my relations, peace, love, and harmony.